And we welcome you to this special edition of In the Circle Live, the day before the National Championship Series. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Victor Anderson. Coming up, we're going to talk Oklahoma, Texas. Wow. Yes, that's the National Championship Series. Interesting routes from both teams. We're going to have both teams covered on this show. We're going to be joined by the radio voice of the Texas Longhorns, Andrew Haynes, he's got to be chest pumping when he gets on here at about an hour, right?
Why not?
Woo-hoo! He's had a heck of a run to call. We'll talk to him about that. And then about 8:30, about an hour and a half from the show, Joey Helmer, who covers OU sports at 247, will come on and talk about the OU perspective and the Sooners as they go for history. And coming up in about 10 minutes, Justin McLeod will be joining us to break down what his thoughts on OU Texas. But, there's that big coaching carousel move in College Station we're going to break down as well. That's all coming up on this show. My goodness, it's a full plate, Victor.
Brother, we're so full. First of all, we want to take the time before we bring on Justin to thank each and every one of you for supporting our live stream, supporting our YouTube channel, the post-game press conferences we've been putting up, our live streams. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do pre and post game streams for the championship series. So tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Eric will be running that pregame show, getting you ready for the champ series game 1. And then after the final out on Wednesday, we will do a post game stream. Same thing for game 2. And then if necessary, game 3 Friday night, we will do that for you as well. Follow our social media. We'll give you all the details about that. We're still going to have a podcast on Thursday, but it's going to be heavy D2, exclusively D2 and D3. So there'll be no mention of the championship series on Thursday's episode.
Well, that's the beauty of what we're doing here. We're going to be on live throughout the champ series, post game. So we'll get you covered that way, YouTube channel. But we haven't forgotten about you, D2, D3. Victor, you got some big plans there for the Thursday pod. This is what we do it In the Circle, the only entity that does this.
The podcast of champions, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you fans of, as we like to call it now, the softball capital of the war, Oklahoma, Andrea Vaughn, the head coach of the Division II national champion Hillcats of Rogers State. She will be one of our guests. Yes, I said guest, plural, coming up on Thursday's episode. Once we get the other guests confirmed, we will announce that individual on our Twitter. Make sure you follow us on our social media, like us, subscribe, download our podcast, all that good stuff.
Let's get Rogers State. By the way, I wonder where they're from.
Oklahoma.
Let's get into it. Oklahoma, Texas is the National Championship Series matchup. You and I, Victor, talked at length about Oklahoma beating UCLA on our podcast. But we touched on the wackiness that was Texas-Oklahoma State. I want to start there because, full disclosure, by the time me and Victor finished recording, it was around 1 a.m. And I still had to do a presser and upload all that. But I don't think we went into detail as in-depth. I think we went into detail about the crazy play that certainly will be talked about forever in Stillwater and certainly in Austin. Now that you've had some time to think about it, really at about not even 24 hours, but 20-some hours, what do you think of that Texas-Oklahoma State? Texas doubling up Oak State, coming back from 5-0 deficit to beat Oklahoma State 6-5. By the way, the first one-run game in the Women's College World Series.
Well, Kevin Brown, first of all, a tip of the cap to Kevin Brown and Amanda Scarborough and Andrea Carter. Their work together in that particular den doubleheader with Oklahoma State, Texas, and that call by Kevin Brown he had of that little league home run that gave Texas the lead and subsequent win, just top-notch work by him. And that's right at this point probably the best thing about the Baltimore Orioles, him and Melanie Newman.
Come on, let's be nice.
I was being nice.
All right. It was wild, right? Like, it just kind of stunning. Oklahoma State's defense broke down. I think they made 3 errors in that game. A lot of people asking why didn't they go with Kelly Maxwell in the first game? Did you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with it because if you get in a situation where you have a lead late, you can bring Maxwell in the game to close. If you win, you're good. You give Maxwell a day of rest. You presume she'll pitch game 1 of the Champ Series tomorrow night. If you lose the game, Maxwell's already warmed up. You bring her out to start an if necessary game. So I don't have a problem with that. And I feel fans nowadays with social media are so consumed about, was that the right move? Why did they do this? Coaches make those moves because they have confidence in that individual. They can get the job done. And if they have to go with a plan B or alter their plan, they'll do it if necessary. But credit to Texas. Courtney Day has been a house of fire.
3-run homer that got him back in the game.
Yeah. And then how about Haley Dolcini? Can we give a credit to Azell Check for Texas getting the win in game 1?
Shutout against them, yeah.
Shutout against Oklahoma State. Started game 2. Didn't go well. Texas battles back. They bring in Dolcini. She shuts the door. And the buy-in of this Texas pitching staff let's remember, Simpson got the start and won that game 3 in Fayetteville to get them to Oklahoma City. Azell Check wins the elimination game Sunday versus Arizona, shuts out Oklahoma State Monday night to set up the unnecessary game. And then Dolcini comes in, shuts the door, puts them in the Champ Series versus Oklahoma. And this might be the best coaching job we have seen from Mike White in his entire coaching career.
It's been remarkable of a run, and we'll get into that more with Justin McLeod coming up in a few minutes from X-Rating Softball. We're going to talk about the coaching carousel, big move, Texas A&M. It's official. Trisha Ford is the new head coach at Texas A&M. What does that mean for the Aggies? What does that mean for Arizona State? Oh, by the way, there's other moves we got to get into. We'll get into that with Justin. Andrew Haynes, the radio voice of Texas at 8 o'clock Eastern, top of the hour. And then Joey Helmer covers OU athletics at 8:30. Let me ask you this, a couple things before we bring in Justin, Victor, because my eyes, a lot of TV numbers coming out. I tweeted some of that at Eric Lopez-Elo. The ABC game, OU Texas, did about 1.2 million viewers, nearly doubling the competition, by the way, during that time slot, including crushing that pathetic USFL football league. More than quadruple the NCAA baseball regional numbers between Michigan and Louisville, and doubling up the PGA Tour. Of course, you have one of these guys. Well, gee, they're supposed to. No, nobody. No, I don't want to hear it. They crushed it. 1.2. Monday night's game, Oklahoma State, Texas. We just talked about 1.3 million, 1.5 million. We'll see what the ratings will be for the Champ Series between Texas and Oklahoma. But the thing that kind of struck me, Victor, and I got to give you credit. I think you made this happen because you've been clamoring and calling out Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon to talk a little softball on Pardon Interruption. And Lord behold, look what happened in the opening block today.
In the A block, second story, Texas, Oklahoma made PTI. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. He, ladies and gentlemen, if this ain't proof that God hears your prayers, woo, won't he do it, Jesus? Woo.
So what do you make of? I mean, they broke it down in the segment. Now, my suggestion to the producers, and over there,
Barrack Home and company,
bring Amanda Scarborough for 5 good minutes. All right.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, nothing against Mark Messier, who was their guest today on 5 Good Minutes.
Nothing wrong with the captain.
Let's bring Amanda Scarborough. Let's expand on this. But but Kornheiser trying to go with the Villanova-Georgetown storyline from the college basketball in '85 to give Texas a shot, whereas Wilbon kind of feels Oklahoma is going to walk away with this. Your thought? But you had a problem with a different ESPN show.
Yeah, Around the Horn, which seems to be the enemy of all things softball. They were doing their buy or sell today, and Israel Gutierrez took a shot at the Oklahoma home field advantage. Izzy, one problem. It was Oklahoma State who Texas beat to get to the Champ Series. If you can actually stay on topic and I mentioned heat culture every other sentence,
Wow.
you can actually know what the heck is going on. But hey, don't worry, Izzy. You have plenty of time to watch college softball like all of us starting tomorrow night because the Miami Heat aren't playing in the NBA Finals. It's the Boston Celtics. So don't worry. Izzy, I forgive you for now, but come on, be better, Izzy. By the way, obviously, technical, we're still working to get Justin McLeod on. We're having some issues there. Yes, Steve. You know, we try to get the people on. So we did have a little bit of issues trying to get the post up for tonight's live stream. So we do apologize for
what
some
happened.
of the
Really?
I forgot to make it public, so we had to tweet out the link. So we apologize about that. Oh, there he is, properly caffeinated with Dr. Pepper and fully rested, I presume, after last night.
That might be a little crazy.
I say fully rested in quotation marks. Our friend Justin McLeod, national softball editor from Extra Inning Softball. Justin, how does it feel to actually have a day where you didn't have to be at the park for about 12, 13 hours?
I mean, feels great, I guess. I mean, honestly, I kind of prefer the 12, 13-hour days because they get done real quick and then I can rest after. I don't know what to do with myself not having to be somewhere in the middle of the series.
Hey, this is what they wanted. They wanted this day for the media. There was media availability today, which, by the way, you can check it out on our In the Circle YouTube channel. It's posted. Oklahoma and the Texas press conferences from today. Each Oklahoma went over a half hour. Texas nearly went a half hour. Justin, let's start there. You were there because you are the man when it comes to that press room. No joke, Victor. There's actually another media person that changed his first name to Justin just so he can get his name called. I feel like that's how big Justin is. That's how many times I heard Justin's name called by the moderators. I'm waiting on Zoom just to get one in. Anyway, what stood out to you from the media availability today from both OU and Texas?
I mean, Texas is still really loose. I think that's kind of been their hallmark through the postseason, through the NCAA tournament. They're still really loose. They're still, I mean, Mike White, when he's loose, has some of the greatest quotes. And today he threw out the first question somebody asked Mike White, first question anybody asked Texas was, do you believe in the concept of playing with house money? And Mike White's response was that when he goes to Vegas, he's a donator, not a gambler. And that just kind of tells you the spot that Texas is in. They weren't supposed to win anything. Weren't supposed to win the regional in Seattle. Weren't supposed to win the super regional in Fayetteville. Weren't supposed to win this week. And here you go. Certainly weren't supposed to win on Sunday, but here you go. So Texas is still Texas. They're still loose. They're still the underdogs. They still have the chip on their shoulder. You know, whatever got that chip there, it's there. They're not mad about it. Oklahoma, I mean, I don't think Oklahoma is any different than expected either. They know how to play with the pressure. They are good at playing with the pressure. I think they're just Oklahoma's just Oklahoma. Had Texas's number all but, you know, that one game this year. And even then, you know, that was game 3 of a series. I'm not sure we're going to get to game 3 of a series to see, you know, to see what happens this time. So, I mean, both teams kind of just continuing where they were. I didn't get a lot of tenseness, didn't get a lot of but no, I mean, just much of the same for both teams. And, I mean, they both know what's at stake. I will say that one of the questions that was posed to Mary Iacopo and Haley Dolcini was that they weren't native to the Red River rivalry. Did it mean anything to them beforehand, before they got to Texas? And I believe it was Iacopo who started it off, and her response was that it did not, and it still didn't mean a whole lot to her because as far as she's concerned, you go out there, you want to win no matter who you're playing. So I was like, that was something that was interesting to me.
From the Texas perspective, Justin, and you kind of mentioned what Coach White was saying about how they were really expected to be there, and their that whole concept of playing with house money. That response, that was just funny. Is that that classic Mike White? I really don't know what is, but the fact that he had confidence in Ezel Check to start game 1 versus Oklahoma State, pitch the shutout, and then bring her back in the circle in the if necessary game that Texas eventually won. Was that more about how well she was pitching versus the Cowgirls in game one as opposed to saving Dolcini for that if necessary game?
I think starting Estelle Check on Monday was a gamble even in game one. When they brought Estelle Check in, she was planned to be a reliever. She wasn't going to be a frontline starter. She wasn't even at the time. It was supposed to be O'Leary and Dolcini 1-2. Check can be in there in the bullpen. You do whatever. That was the idea. Then you go to say Clearwater 2 weeks into the season, and all of a sudden Check is in that week the ace. She looked the best. I think then you knew you had a little promise. Well, then down the stretch of the season, Dolcini does what Dolcini does, looks like what they expect her to look like, performs they expect her to perform. Then you get to the postseason, though. Dolcini is practically broken at this point. Like if you've watched throughout the postseason and the things she's done and the way she's done them and all that kind of stuff, she's been playing with injuries. She's been playing with pain. We've talked in press conferences. You've seen on television, massages you've talked about. You've seen her stretching in the dugout in the middle of a half inning. Like all that kind of stuff has been Dolcini's jam through the postseason. Happened in the regional in Seattle. I think Seattle was where they might have shown her in the behind the bullpen getting stretched out. I was at the Super Regional in Arkansas. She was getting stretched out then. She was getting massaged after games, all kinds of stuff like that. All kinds of stuff. So I think starting Check was strategic, but also it was a gamble because she's not the best one out there, but she might be the healthiest of your best. And then Check goes out and does what she does. And at that point, I think you've got to ride the hot hand. Now, it almost did not pay off. To be fair, it almost did not pay off. I didn't think Check was bad, but it was a gamble. And then at the end of the day, she kept him in it enough that they were able to make that run at the end of the game.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss that because that was a crazy last game, but especially the last hour and a half of that game. I'm going to start on the field first because we'll get to the off the field stuff here in a couple of minutes. But take me through it. You were on the field. You were in the stadium when in the fifth inning, where to me up to this point, the play of the series that's probably going to be remembered. It's definitely going to be remembered in Austin and Stillwater. Took place. Mm-hmm. The base hit to right, the bobble by Petty, the right fielder, then Busby throwing to second goes all the way to center field. Texas scores 3 runs to take the lead. Give me your perspective as you were down in the stadium.
So first, my physical perspective was actually I was in left field, right behind the left field foul pole. So it was kind of a unique viewpoint from the normal press box. The thing too, being in left field, you don't have the replay to go off of. You don't have the count on the score, but you kind of just have to watch the field. So I'm sitting there in left field, and Bella Dayton spanks the ball into left field or into right field. Okay, Texas is clawing back. It's this is going to be interesting and all that. And then, Petty in right field, not picking the ball up cleanly is a play that's going to happen all the time. Like that's not uncommon. Let's Whitaker score, all well and good. Still got a game here, etc. I think the thing that gets me the most, and it was the thing that I had the most interesting angle of, because from left field, when Busby takes the cut and throws to second, one thing you couldn't see was just how far the ball went. So from my viewpoint, I couldn't see that the ball rolled all the way to the wall at first. All I could see was somebody chasing the ball and just have to see where she stopped. I think the thing to me, and don't get me wrong, I'd hate to be Haley Busby right now because she feels like that game's probably on her shoulders. Yes, it was a play that nobody's going to forget. It was an error that just an unimaginable error. Yes, but at the end of the day, Kenny Gask even said in the post-game press conference, they didn't lose that game strictly because of those errors in that inning. Like that was a flat Oklahoma State team in game one. And it was, especially after that error, they had time to respond, but they were flat after that too. So there were other things besides the errors itself. But the thing that gets me is I remember when that ball rolled out there, I was standing next to an usher, and I think it was Jefferson came around to score. That tied the game. And then we both look and we see Bella Dayton running home. We kind of look at each other like, that's the girl who just hit the ball, isn't it?
Yes.
And so we were watching the play develop, and then of course you watch the big screen and the jumbo, the video board, and it's just one of those plays. I'll never forget it. It was wacky. It started out simple, and it turned a little wacky. Then it turned really wild. And watching that, and the one thing I will say, Texas had the third base dugout because they were the home. There you go. See, that's why you ask the experts. But the Texas dugout on the third base, so they had the home dugout for the first game of the day, so they just stayed. Watching that dugout erupt like a volcano, just erupt.
Well, the coaching staff.
Oh yeah.
Like from the TV side, they're showing. Once the ball's in center field, the next thing you see is Coach Bartlett at first base jumping like, go, go. You see Singleton, I think he was in the on-deck circle. He's yelling, going, Mike White, everybody's going. It was one of the most chaotic plays.
It was.
I can't even imagine what it was like to see it in person. And just one of the most shocking plays maybe in the history of the World Series.
It really was. I mean, and the thing is, Oklahoma State is a defensively solid team. They bank on it. That is one of the hallmarks of that team. You don't hear about the defense as much as you do for a Florida, but their defense is so solid. And for defense to be what beat them, I beat themselves. It's not going to be one I forget anytime soon. I'll say that.
They're not going to forget it either.
They certainly are. And Eric, Jesse James brings up a point in the chat about Oklahoma State. As much as that play energized and galvanized Texas, it almost served as the backbreaker for Oklahoma State. Even though there was still a lot of softball to be played, it felt like that they had lost the game at that particular point, even though it was still a one-run game with at least 3 innings of softball left to go.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's a play. But we've seen this. All three of us have covered softball through various platforms for many years. A play like that can distraught a team. It really can, because it's just you just felt like you just gave away 3 runs if you're Oklahoma, especially with your ace, Kelly Maxwell. And then if you're Texas, you're thinking, this is our game. We got new life. It's crazy. It's one of the craziest plays ever. And, Kenny Gajewski brought it up, as you mentioned. I mean, he felt they were flat. He felt he was flat in game 1. Rough day for them, for their athletic department, because their baseball team got knocked out Monday night as well at home in the regionals to Arkansas. Maybe that's some bad juju or something. I don't know. But certainly glorious for Texas, who will be playing for the national championship for the first time. Last question I'll ask about OU Texas, because then we got a lot of business to get going off the field here. Give me your keys to the series. I assume you're picking Oklahoma, but give me your thoughts on the series.
I am picking Oklahoma. If I didn't, I think you guys would just have to shoot me.
Easy. We don't.
I think Texas can keep it competitive. I don't know that they will, but I think they can keep it competitive. I think you're definitely going to need solid pitching from Dolcini, Check, the whole staff. I think you're going to have Texas pitchers hang in there and be able to at least mitigate what the OU offense does. I mean, Texas's offense can score. But they're not going to score 10, 12 runs. So the first thing for me is Texas pitching's got to be solid. They've got to be stacked. They've got to be consistent, whether that's Dolcini or Check or Simpson or Hulan or anybody. You've got to have Texas's pitching constantly consistent with really, score a couple of runs here, that's fine, but they need to not allow any major big innings. They don't need Oklahoma to get a 5-run inning and get that kind of momentum. The other thing for me too is Texas has to do to Oklahoma's pitching what they did to Maxwell. Take advantage of the few misses, poke a ball into right field, make them do the work. Probably if we're talking trying to make defensive errors, because that's not going to happen. But poke it anywhere else around the field and just make them do the work. Because the thing is, this is still the championship series. Oklahoma's a veteran team, but everybody makes mistakes. So that to me is the other key is they've got to take advantage of the opportunities against Oklahoma's pitching and try to do to them what they did to Maxwell. I mean, she's not responsible, quote unquote, for all 6 runs that got charged to her, but if they can do that to Oklahoma, it might actually be a series. What a thought.
We shall see. Now let's move on because so the game's going on Monday night, Oklahoma State, Texas. That crazy play happens in the 5th inning.
Uh-huh.
And I swear it was like 30 minutes after that or so, news starts leaking out from outlets, including you, that Texas A&M has hired Trisha Ford to be their next head coach. This happened during the game. By the way, let's fast forward now to Tuesday. A&M announces this officially that Trisha Ford is the head coach, literally minutes before Texas is about to go to do media availability. Are you kidding me? Anyway, as we expected, some sauciness, I'm sure, there.
Pettiness is the correct word, Mr.
Whatever you
Lopez.
want to use. I don't know. Coincidence, whatever. Justin, you were part of it that broke the story. Other outlets did as well. We've been following this A&M story for a while. I obviously even mentioned on the Sunday night episode that there were 2 names I kept hearing, and I said this could be a seismic move. It turns out the one of the 2 names is not who it was. I won't mention who it is, so it's not as seismic as I thought it would be, but this is still pretty seismic. Anytime you have a coach that just won the Pac-12 championship and has been to the Women's College World Series, take us through this. How the heck did you find this out during a game, and your thoughts on Trisha Ford A&M?
I mean, I'm going to plead the 5th on the first question.
Fair.
I'll say this. The A&M hiring process was unexpectedly complex. I said from the beginning that I didn't think A&M would get past their top 5. If they didn't get past their top 5, I didn't have Trisha Ford in my top 5 for them. So I
did have them on your list. In fairness, you did have her on your list.
She was in my top 10.
Okay, I'm just saying to clear it up for the audience.
But when I said top 5, I was not thinking Trisha Ford. I thought they'd get somebody of a bigger star power. Got told no a few times. Maybe there were some other factors at play with some others that kind of took them out of the picture that maybe weren't there at the beginning. The process also went on far longer than I think A&M wanted it to, than anybody expected it to. Initially, I was expecting an announcement last week of a very different coach who ultimately said no. Said no, declined, stay where it was. Okay, cool. You get to Trisha Ford at somebody who, like you say, has been to the World Series, went in 2018, her second year at Arizona State, has a Pac-12 championship under her belt now, just won it this year. At the same time, though, you've got a Pac-12 title, you've got a World Series berth. At the same time, the Pac-12 coaching salaries are not nearly what they are in the SEC, in the Big 12, in the ACC for the most part, for the top part, I guess. You're also seen as what I'll call a lesser than in the Pac-12 because you win the Pac-12, you beat UCLA head-to-head in a series, and you're seated behind them. While I don't necessarily disagree with the argument for that, I do, but not completely. It's going to be hard to beat that, to ever be seen as better than UCLA, probably in most years as better than Washington. In better years, Arizona's there, Oregon's there. You're always going to be in a pack. No pun intended. Okay, pun slightly intended. And I think there's a lot of factors from Trisha Ford's perspective. And if you're A&M, you still get to win the press conference. I don't think Trisha Ford is the best hire they could have made. She's not the best coach they could have offered. She's not the sexiest hire. She's a solid hire, though. She's a coach who's had success. Again, World Series, Pac-12 title. But it's one of those hires that I think is solid. If I'm grading it, it's an easily passing grade. I think she can do some things at A&M. We'll see just how many things, though.
And now, Justin, with that first big domino falling, not as big of a domino as we anticipated with the names that we heard that they were trying to gun for to bring to College Station, but with Trisha Ford gone, that obviously opens up Arizona State. And what could happen with Arizona State and who they hired can set off a coaching carousel. And Eric, I kind of talked about this on Sunday. Could it be similar to what we saw with Stanford bringing Jessica Allister back from Minnesota and seeing something along those lines with the names that could be involved?
I do now, by the way, Victor. I will say personally, because I kind of said that at the time on Sunday night, I said there was two names, and depending who they get, if it was one of them in particular that didn't end up being that person, I would have said it would have blown that one out of the water.
Yep.
This is pretty similar. What's ironic, and I don't know if you did this on purpose or not, Victor, but of course, Trisha Ford has ties to Stanford, where she was an assistant under John Rittman. And when Lonnie Alameda was they were an assistant back then. So I don't know if that was, but
I do think that was not my intention.
Just checking.
Coincidental.
But I do think, Justin, this is a big domino. Like I said, here's what I'm going to defend the Trisha Ford hire. She won at Fresno State too. It's not like, she just, she's had success where she's been. I mean, that Fresno State with Joe Compton and company, some argue they could have hosted that year. They didn't. They didn't have the, whatever. She won. She got to Arizona State. That's been to the World Series. Was literally outs away this year from being there where you're at right now. Which, think about what that could have meant for this A&M search if she was still at the World Series. And she's won a Pac-12 title, which not many people can say. In fact, I'll say this. I remember 4 years ago, Justin, right around this time, Texas made a hire a little bit in the offseason. They hired a coach that just won the Pac-12 title that had been to the World Series. They're doing pretty well.
Somebody on the screen broke that story to us as we were talking about it.
Deja vu. So I think she can win. The big question, obviously, is can she win to the satisfaction, I guess, of A&M fans? I've spoken to some alumni. They seem to be happy with it. But how do you respond? What do you think this does for the domino, as Victor mentions, for Arizona State?
I think there will be a domino effect. I don't think there will be a large cascading domino effect. I think there will be a smaller domino effect. In part because A&M, when it opened, honestly, from terms of facilities, the money offered, the resources, all of that, it's a top 5 job. Not a top 5 program, but it's a top 5 coaching job. Arizona State may be the defending Pac-12 champions. They don't have all that. They don't have.
By the way, Justin, I don't mean to interrupt, but for all you Arizona State people who say that Texas A&M is a step down for Arizona State, why don't you go step off a cliff and keep on walking on the lake that you're gonna be driving?
But Victor, there's an example where I think Pac-12 fan is a little bit in denial. All right, and this is why I think it's significant, because here's the bottom line. I've talked to people that have covered Arizona State, have covered the sport, and that is this: they don't have the facilities of a Texas A&M.
No,
they don't have the money that Texas A&M has. They just don't. And this is not just about. And Justin, we talked about this off the air earlier today, but we've learned. You and I have learned this talking to a lot of people. We focus on the head coach salary. But it's more than that these coaches are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. I mean, if you, for instance, you look at the contract extension Lonnie Alameda just signed at Florida State, she didn't get a ton of money. Okay, that's when I say she didn't get a ton of money.
Relatively speaking,
thank you. What she did prioritize in that extension, though, were facility improvements, assistant pool, salary pool going up, money for graduate managers and support staff, extra pieces of it that in turn are going to make her a better coach, a happier coach, more comfortable, program better, all those things. It's not always what goes into the head coach's bank account. That does factor in. I mean, if somebody offers to, double or more my salary, I'm going to have to think pretty long and hard about it. But that's definitely there's definitely other factors in there. And honestly, I think part of how Ford's hired A&M will be graded will come down to, in part, her assistant staff. She got 2 assistants out there at Arizona State. Jeff Harger's the hitting coach. Jimmy Colitis is kind of when he was at Oregon, I referred to him as the glue coach, just because he was his personality is not Mike White's, and so he was kind of the foil, whatever, out there. It's not as much down in Arizona State as he in that sense, but Jimmy Colitis is that kind of just that coach that kind of keeps the team resource. You know what I'm saying?
Keeps everything flowing.
Correct. So those are her two assistants, and I think part of how Ford's hire will be greater will be whether she takes one or both of them with her. I have questions from an offensive perspective, whether that's going to translate out of the desert into muggy Texas. So I think that's going to be a factor that plays in. I know that's something that I'm sure probably factored into Trisha Ford's decision is, assistants and assistant pay and all that kind of stuff. We know what the facilities are between Farrington and Davis Diamond. Big difference. There's a difference between Davis Diamond and most stadiums in the country, if we're going to be honest. I'm not just picking on ASU. But I think that's an aspect of it too. That's a fun question or a fun thought. Sorry, I just looked down and I was reading that.
Yeah, because we saw this when Trisha Ford arrived at Arizona State, notably Danielle Gibson and G. Juarez transferring out of the program. Danielle Gibson going to Arkansas. We saw the success that she had there. And, of course, G. Juarez going to Oklahoma, winning a national championship. So you have to kind of think along – and the transfer portal was just in its infinite stages. Now we have it more where you're seeing high-profile names. And I'll tell you this, Justin. Don't be surprised if you see some marquee pitchers who are already in the portal look at Trisha Ford, her pitching prowess, and say, I can go to Texas A&M and I could be successful there. Look what Mackenzie Herzog has done, being an all-SEC selection that kind of as a two-way player.
The one thing I think is going to work in Trisha Ford's favor, assuming they can play it correctly, is the NIL and what comes along with that with being in Aggie land. The problem she's going to have is you got to be able to sell Aggie land. You can't sell Trisha Ford's a great pitching coach because the first thing somebody's going to say is, well, so is Lonnie Alameda, Courtney Deifel, and Beth Torino. And honestly, I think
and Stephanie Broco prop and Stephanie Broco.
Well, but you're talking about head coaches, though.
Head coaches, yes, thank you.
From a transfer standpoint, if I'm a transfer pitcher, I'm going to look at Lonnie. I'm going to look at Beth. I'm going to look at Courtney. I'm going to look at success they've had. I'm going to look at the pitchers they've tutored.
Well, don't forget Mike White. I mean, this is Texas A&M. This is at the center of all this right here.
And then, of course, there's OU, who you don't have to even have a pitching coach, and OU's going to win some transfers. But they happen to have Jen Rocha, who's okay. She's okay.
She's turned out a few good pitchers in her time.
She's done all right.
But I think you bring up a point here. This is the thing where the Pac-12 has kind of been in trouble here. They're behind facility-wise, NIL-wise, you name it. And we've heard some rumblings about Arizona State, Justin, from an administrative side from that standpoint. And it's not just them. The Pac-12, obviously, it's no secret. Their TV deal is not the best. They got a very important TV negotiations going on here soon. That's why they have a new commissioner in the Pac-12. There's a reason. Look, the Pac-12 fan, it's a great league. Don't get me wrong. It's a great league. But it's won one national title since 2010. That was, they've won since in 2019, UCLA's won the SEC in Oklahoma and potentially now, it's a different ball game. And I think now some of the Pac-12 schools, I think, have started to step up. Will Arizona State? Who knows? But that's part of it.
Well, and one thing I'm seeing some of these comments, and Trisha Ford brought a lot of talent with her from the Fresno State coffers. From where I'm sitting, she's going to have to be pickier who she brings with her from Arizona State to Texas A&M. She can't just bring because the thing about kids at Fresno State, part of the reason Trisha Ford players, I shouldn't say kids, part of the reason she was able to be so successful at Fresno State was the level of talent she was getting. You bring that talent, the Hackbarts, a Juarez, Morgan Howe, all the ones, I think all those have been mentioned over here in the comments. You bring them with you to Arizona State, it's a step up, but they succeed. What she's walking into at Texas A&M is there's already some talent there that you've got to be able to cultivate and keep around. You have to have Haley Lee You have to keep Haley Lee for this next year. You have to keep her out of the portal. You have to make sure she's happy. Mackenzie Herzog's a very important piece. And there's some young talent at A&M that's already there. So I think Trisha Ford needs to be careful who she brings over. And again, I'm going to say it. Maybe I'll be wrong in a year, but I have my doubts that the offense that Arizona State runs is going to have the same level of success in the SEC and in College Station. 2 reasons. One, the desert air is a different thing for an offense that likes a lot of home runs. And number 2, when you have instant replay for every game, you can't get away with as many hit by pitches in the river. Like that's
Are you sure? Are you sure? Have you not seen some of those SEC umpires?
It's possible you're going to get away with at least 2 fewer per game. And when umpires start looking for it, if that stays as part of the game for some of those hitters and some of the hitting philosophies and whatever else.
Right.
And the thing is, don't get me wrong, I'm not faulting Arizona State's offense. It's a great offense. And I'm not even faulting them for sticking their elbow out or letting a pitch hit them in the elbow when it comes in the box by any means. What I am saying is I just am not convinced at this point that the Arizona State offensive strategies are going to translate to A&M, to the state of Texas, to the SEC. So I have my doubts.
But here's the thing, and Michelle Collin brought this up, and Eric, we brought this up a couple times before. The pitching in the SEC was down this year.
Absolutely.
Pitching everywhere was down this year.
But I think especially in the SEC, though, I think that one of the reasons why I think the SEC didn't have the success that maybe they're used to, I don't think they got the pitching in some cases. They got outpitched. I mean, for example, Mariah Mazone was better than anybody Tennessee had on that regional Sunday. Stanford had better pitching than Alabama to that point. So, I think the Pac-12 had some better pitchers. And Arizona, their pitching staff stepped up. Now, it could be one of those things where, hey, some players didn't show up. Obviously, they're for example, Arkansas, you saw them up close. They just didn't hit. They had the pitching. They didn't.
In the regional, in the super regional, excuse me.
Right.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think pitching was down across the country this year. Gabby Plain was not as good as she had been. Oregon's pitching was not.
Injury. Well, they had injuries.
Correct. Right. But I'm saying from an overall, outside of Megan Farema, who was better than I've ever seen her this year.
Yeah.
And Holly Azevedo absolutely stepped up.
Very good. Yeah.
And I didn't expect it. But outside of Azevedo, Gabby Plain was not as good as she had been. Oregon staff, because of Brooke Yanez's injury, just wasn't there. Arizona staff performed better than expected, certainly in the postseason, but remember that they did lose a lot in conference play. Mariah Mazone, I believe, was as good as she's always been. It's just she finally had a second. She finally had somebody where she didn't have
Agreed 100%.
Carry that Beavers team on her back. And you see where it got them. Crazy what to think about if Mazone had support 4 years earlier. I think pitching was down across the country this year because offenses were up. I mean,
is it up? Is it because the offense? Is it because of some people have said the strike zone keeps shrinking a little bit? Or more offense in the game?
I think there's always going to be aspects of it, yeah. But at the end of the day, I just think the way things are the way things are trending in the game of softball, there are always going to be things at play that benefit offensive players. I mean, also one of the things I noticed about a lot of the pitchers who kind of took I don't want to call it a step back, but maybe weren't as sharp as they have been in years past, was a lot of true and fifth-year seniors. Gabby Plain, Alex Storacco, Megan Bodian, Mary Half. I mean, you just go down the list. There are
there's a theory out there that maybe if you stay too long, teams figure you out. There's a theory. Well, you should be. There's been a lot of theories on that. So we'll see.
I also think a lot of the veteran hitters, the fifth-year hitters, the super senior hitters, and all that, I think they benefit more from that extra year than fifth-year pitchers do.
I've heard that from coaches.
Nature of the game.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that. That's fair. No, that's fair. I don't know how we got into this part here. We just ran here a little bit.
I'm just the guest.
Oh, that's right. The whole Pac-12. My point is, look, the Pac-12 is a great league. Obviously, they had 3 teams in the World Series this year. Guess what? They're not in the Champ Series. And
I don't actually think having 3 teams in the World Series makes them a great league.
kind of random, right? It's all about your draw.
Well, it's your seventh, or was it 7th and 9th, or 8th and 9th place team? 7th and 9th place teams.
Yeah, this was a weird World Series. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting as we move forward. Will this be the trend, or will this be an aberration? And to be determined. I think there is a lot of parity in the sport.
There is,
but you're right. This was more upsets than usual. Like, I'm still getting over Florida State losing as a 2 seed. I don't understand what happened there.
Guarantee there's not a soul who does.
I don't know. But so let's talk Arizona State from this standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
How attractive is this job?
I'm going to say middle of the road. It is a Pac-12 champion. That's a major positive. It's a program with history and with national titles, both positives. As of this moment, we'll see if it's still the case in a day or 2 days. It's a team stacked with talent. The Sidney Sanders, the Acuñas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of talent on that team. We'll see who sticks around. As of now, the talent is a major benefit for it. I think at that same time, though, it's still again, I don't want to refer to them as a lesser than program because they're not, but there's a certain perception that a UCLA is always going to be better than Arizona State, right, even if they're not better, which Arizona State taking 2 out of 3 would make me think they're probably not better. Now, postseason would say differently, but you get what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day,
right. The fact that Arizona State won the Pac-12, beat UCLA head-to-head, and UCLA still got a higher seed, right?
And went further in the postseason.
Right, benefit of the doubt to the UCLA's. You're in the shadow of Arizona,
right?
Obviously.
Well, I think Arizona's program, from an athletic standpoint, is also going to be a factor in that, because you have to go back to January, and you had the issues that hit social media with the players and the booster shots and all that kind of stuff, and the administration requiring it and then not requiring it, and petitions and all kinds of stuff going on. You've seen all the stuff with the Arizona State football program and the issues around it. You've honestly, even go back to Herm Edwards being hired as the Arizona State football coach. It's just a little unexpectedly wacky. Yeah, I'll go with that wording. So my point is, I think there's going to be some aspects of the Arizona State athletic program that are going to play into how attractive the job is. I still think Arizona State's going to have a shot at getting some really quality candidates and probably a really quality coach. But I don't think they're going to be a shoo-in. They're certainly not to the level of attractiveness that A&M was. At Just Facts Mem on Twitter, come at me. Also, save it if you feel like it, because on this one, I'm very, very confident.
Woo! High take McLeod
job
in the house here, Victor.
At the end of the day, A&M's a better job, better facilities, bigger higher ceiling, better resources. And the thing is, if you go into Texas A&M and you win, not just because you're in the SEC, but because if you go to the A&M and you win, you're going to be seen as a winner. If you go into Arizona State and win, you have got to practically run the table and look like world beaters to be seen the same way. And I think that's going to be something that factors in to who takes the Arizona State job. If you think about the names that were tossed around for A&M, the level of those names. Like, I mean, she signed a contract extension with Florida State now, but you think about Lonnie Alameda. Lonnie Alameda to A&M, anybody's going to look at that and go, that's interesting. I don't think she'd go, but I wonder if she would. You say Lonnie Alameda to Arizona State, once everybody stops laughing, you're going to have to come up with reasons to justify it, and you can't. It's just there's a difference there, and it has nothing to do with the conference and everything to do with just the way the program is set up, the resources, et cetera. So I think you're going to be able to get somebody who's a solid coach, a good coach, but it's going to be somebody stepping up rather than somebody who's already at a high level saying, you know what, right, I want to go be Arizona State's head coach.
And also, Justin, sorry, Eric, that you asked the question. Also, you're going to be seen on SEC Network in some capacity, whether it's the SEC Network or SEC Network Plus, as opposed to Arizona State. Yeah, the Pac-12 isn't exactly as visible as the SEC Network. So what helps with your recruiting?
It isn't as visible as the ACC or the Big 12 anymore. Like, just isn't. Like, it's just not. And the presentation, it just is. I mean, that's just
And
reality.
the presentation.
And it's a credit to the coaches in the league to have the success they have, even with that. Mm-hmm. So they're lucky they're lucky in that a lot of these coaches that have ties to their schools are really good at what they do, and it's kept the Pac-12 here because it's not because of the administration's helps in most of these places. Most.
Well, and that's where, at the end of the day, I don't think conference plays a role in Texas A&M being a better job than Arizona State. But when you get into conferences, it deepens the divide, as I call it. I think it doesn't help by any means. Okay, quality question.
Michelle Carr with a question. If making it to OKC isn't the metric, what is?
So I'm assuming she probably commented that, and correct me if I'm wrong. After I said that having 3 teams in Oklahoma City doesn't automatically make the Pac-12 a hugely great conference.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fun sports topic, by the way. Victor, this takes us back to our sports talk radio days. This is a beautiful.
It certainly does.
Yes, because I know I have an answer to this, but go ahead, Justin.
So assuming that's the context, and if it's not, forgive me, but assuming that's the context, Arizona and Oregon State are teams that finished at the bottom of the conference. Both came through when they needed to get to the World Series. But for instance, the Sun Belt got 4 teams into the NCAA tournament last year. Makes them a good league, makes them solid league. Doesn't make them world beaters because look at them this year. They got 1. James Madison got to the World Series last year. Ran the table, beat some really good teams, beat a couple of SEC teams, etc. Doesn't mean the CAA is all of a sudden a much stronger conference because of it. Getting to the World Series, to me, is the metric of the strength of a team. I mean, I said all along Arizona should be in the NCAA tournament. They made it. Look where they got. Same time, I said Oregon State, I wouldn't have put them in based on their general season resume. They proved me wrong. They got here. But I don't think those teams or any specific teams getting to the World Series itself is necessarily indicative of the conference. Because I can also turn that on its head and say Arizona State didn't make it to the World Series. Oregon didn't even make it to Super Regionals. Washington didn't make it to the Super Regionals. It goes both ways. The overall body of work to me is always the best indicator of the strength of a conference. Pac-12 was a stronger conference than people gave it credit for. Absolutely was.
The number 2 conference in the sport.
Correct. But getting to the World Series.
That's what the RPI, by the way. That's according to the RPI. The RPI is the consideration there. But anyway, go ahead.
But no, I mean, just to me, your 7th and 9th place teams getting to the World, and your second. Getting there.
So this is a funny topic because I just listened to a Florida State podcast because they were talking about Lonnie Alameda's contract. And one of the other topics they talked about was Florida State's baseball going out in the regionals. And, where's the state of the program and things like that. And I thought one of the hosts made a good point. And this is, I apply this to college basketball. Victor, you and I have done sports talk radio, so this is not.
Yes.
How do you evaluate a team that does great in the regular season, which is a bigger sample, versus a tournament that is, quite frankly, a crapshoot? That's really what it comes down to. Do you value a team like, for example, like Tennessee had a great year. They had a bad weekend. Does that mean they're a bad program? No. Does that mean Oregon State in the long run is a better program than Tennessee? No. But in that weekend, Oregon State's better. I don't believe the 8 best teams in the country are in Oklahoma City this year.
Oh,
they're
hell
not.
No.
But that doesn't mean that the other teams that got there didn't deserve it, right?
Correct.
So I think it depends on what you value. There are a lot of great programs that have great lengthy seasons that don't get to the World Series for many reasons. Now, another aspect that I like to evaluate is how did you do compared to the seed that you got? For example, if you're on the road, like a UCF is an example. How did they do? Well, this is the first time they won a regional. What took them so long? You know what took them so long? They kept getting sent to Gainesville and Tallahassee as a 2 or a 3 seed. Now, they kept getting to regional finals, but they kept losing to the host team. So there's a lot of variables. Head-to-head in softball doesn't work because there's a lot of politics that comes to that. Because, first of all, the majority of the time that an SEC or a Pac-12 play are either in Mary Nutter or they're playing at Clearwater. So that's a crapshoot. So in the end, I don't think necessarily that the best teams get to the World Series, but that's the tournament. That's the beauty of it. That's the 2 out of 3. That's how this works.
It's interesting with the whole.
The good news is I think there's more parity in the sport that makes it a little bit more interesting, by the way.
I agree. I agree with you. But I think the thing is, Eric, we don't see those matchups, Pac-12 versus SEC, until in tournaments like Mary Nutter and Clearwater.
Correct.
Until we get to the postseason, because everyone has their different philosophies on schedule.
The Pac-12 doesn't come south or east until ESPN created the Clearwater tournament, except a few exceptions. A lot of Pac-12 schools don't come here. A lot of this is financial, budget, travel, a lot of factors.
Especially now, especially with the pandemic, that the travel has been really restricted in the last couple of years.
Right. So it's just is what it is. It's here's the bottom line. The only thing that matters when it comes to the World Series, who's at the top at the end. And right now, it looks like it's going to be a team in Oklahoma once again, which maybe they should have their own conference. Maybe that's the answer.
Let them be like BYU and just be independent and just play whoever's willing to play them.
I love Fang Nine's idea, by the way. We need a Pac-12 SEC challenge. I've been calling for that for a while.
For the record, if we have that, though, I need some extra pieces of it. Like I need some, Laura Berg versus Rachel Lawson one-on-ones or something. Like I need some extra. If we're going to go Pac-12 versus SEC and softball, I need some extra entertainment beyond just field, though.
Yeah. It's kind of what the ACC Big Ten has had their own little tournament on that. So I want to get a couple quick thoughts because we got to move on. I mean, as usual, Justin, we go real fast. And we just
shocking. I don't know about y'all.
But I do want to hit you up about a couple other options here. We talked a lot about A&M and Arizona State, but an under the radar move that I think it's a pretty big move. Krista Wood going from South Dakota State to Creighton. Victor, as it turns out, you and I got to see Krista Wood's last game as head coach at South Dakota State in Orlando when they were eliminated by Michigan. Unfortunately, I didn't cross paths with her because South Dakota State always played before UCF, and I'm doing radio for UCF. But anyway, your thoughts on the move?
I mean, I think she done all she could do at South Dakota State. You win the tournament, the regular season, the tournament twice. You win a game in each regional each year. You have incredible hitters. You have incredible pitchers. You managed to get them all to stick around for more than a year, which in the day of the transfer portal, honestly, might be Krista Wood's best achievement. I mean, that's a testament to her. But I think she's done all she could do. You were in the Summit League. You were in Brookings. I think at a certain point you reach a cap, and even as good as you are. So, I mean, she's from a small town. I believe it's right around the Iowa-Nebraska state line. She went to Omaha in college, so it's a little bit back home for her, certainly closer to home, a little more back home for her. So I think, and the Big East is a growing league in softball. UConn, Villanova, DePaul. I mean, even Butler. And so I like the move from Creighton's perspective because Krista Wood's a heck of a coach, a really good coach, and she's had a lot of success. But I mean, I don't know how it's going to go at the end of the day because she's going to have to build. At the end of the day, that's my thing. Is she's going to have to build. So she's not going to be able to do the right away, go out and win 50 games kind of thing. So I'm curious to see what that's going to mean for her.
All right, Justin, we've run out of time. We're out of time. We could do this for hours. I have a feeling we'll bring you back in during the coaching carousel, definitely in the podcast during the off season. And we'll see what other moves are made. Sir, tell the audience where they can find your work.
extrainningsoftball.com, at JustFactsHim on Twitter. That's where all my hot takes are, I guess. Except
send your hate over there, man. I've already got hate over here. Like, man. Again, my whole point, by the way, people are asking about the postseason. Let me ask you this real quick. If Arizona ended up playing Florida State instead of Mississippi State, is Arizona at the World Series? Probably not.
No, probably not. But again, I don't understand how Mississippi State was in the Super Regionals.
Nobody. But no, I don't either. Nobody does. But that's my point. The sport postseason can be a crapshoot sometimes.
Yeah,
it's just
that's why you play the games.
It's a crapshoot on a weekend. Anyway, Justin, enjoy your rest of your off day, quote unquote, from Oklahoma City.
Appreciate you, fellas.
Justin McLeod, Extra Innings Softball, joining us. But we're not even close to done, are we, Victor?
No. We talked. Remember that play we talked about last night with Texas and the Little League home run, and we praised Kevin Brown for his call. We got the man who called it from the Texas perspective, who joins us now from the Longhorn Radio Network, front of the podcast, Mr. Andrew Haynes. First of all, Andrew, how is your voice after all the madness that you got the call last night with the Longhorns making it to the Champ Series, sir?
It's doing okay now. I definitely woke up feeling a little scratchy, but I've gotten better throughout the day.
Been there, done that. I can tell you that. I know that feeling well. Well, let's start with last night and the last game and that play in the fifth inning that Victor just described. You had a unique perspective. Take us through it, because you're locked in every pitch, as you have to. For those that don't know, broadcasters, we have to be locked in on every scenario, who's hitting, who's all the sequence. Just take me how you observed it as that all evolved.
Yeah, I mean, it was a situation they were down by 2, and I feel like I'm thinking there on the air, like, well, it just takes 1 or 2 hits, and they have a good shot to maybe score a run here. Whitaker on second, not a fast runner, but Scott on first, plenty of speed, and the batter Bella Dayton is speedy too. And so see basically through the right side, like, okay, cool, that's at least load the bases. And then I see out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking back to the infield to see where the runners are going, and out of the corner of my eye, I see the ball just briefly kick away from the fielder, and I saw Whitaker stopped at third, and then Mike White ushering her home, like just making the motion, saying something like "go, go, go," and I see her go. I'm like, okay, well, here comes Whitaker, and then the throw comes in, and I saw what Busby was looking at. She was looking at me as Scott being a solid 15, 20 feet off the bag at second. Accurate throw, Scott's in a rundown. And so all of a sudden Busby fires it. And I mean, I don't know where, I think it was the shortstop, Kylie Naomi, who was covering second. And for some reason she was off on the second base side of the bag out toward right field, it looked like, rather than being more on the shortstop side of the bag to take the throw. And Busby's throw might have still been wide of her had she been on that shortstop side of the bag. But I see her start to throw it, and then Scott start to break, which is what she does often, especially running the bases after a pitch, taking a big lead, trying to draw a throw from the catcher, and she'll get the throw and then break for second. And that happened, I think, previously once in the World Series already. And so she starts to go, and that throw's nowhere near the fielder, and all of a sudden it's just sailing out in the outfield. And in my mind, it's like, oh boy, like they have a good chance to take the lead, because Bella Dayton on first base, she can fly. Scott, no problem coming home. Also the center fielder, I think, was going over to back up the right fielder a little bit, help out just in case. And so she was nowhere near that play. And so, Cheyenne Factor, the center fielder, she had to chase it down, and there's an inkling in the back of my mind that they might throw Bella Dayton out, but I was pretty sure that she was going to make it. And as you guys have mentioned, the coaches just going ballistic. Steve Singleton out, halfway between the dugout and the baseline, jumping, and Bartlett on the first base coach's box, and so that was just mind-blowing crazy.
It's a memorable play. It's one of the most memorable plays. It's the memorable play to this point of the World Series. It's a play that will be remembered in Austin and Stillwater. Where does this play rank in your career? You've called a lot of games, different sports. Ironically, obviously you were at Texas. You've been at Fresno before that, which, wow, perfect timing for you. We have some questions about one of the people at Fresno that you know very well that's now at A&M. But where does that play rank in your career, broadcasting-wise?
It's definitely up there. It's considering the impact of the moment, where the team was, and where it brought him to. It's probably number one. There are some other ones that have probably been pretty wacky, that at least in terms of just pure the play on the field, how crazy it was, it's probably been up there. But considering that it gave them the lead after they were down by 2, facing a first-team All-American, and down to their final, 8 outs or so of potentially their season, that's probably up there as number one.
we talk about Haley Dolcini, Andrew, rightfully so, with the performance that she helped to get Texas to this point. But Azelle Check, for her to do what she did for Sunday night, beating Arizona to get them to Oklahoma State, then she shuts out the Cowgirls in game one to force the if necessary. If Azelle Check doesn't pitch probably the two best games of her career back to back, we're not looking at that if necessary situation that you saw Texas get themselves into late Monday night.
Yeah, Estelle has been, quite the interesting story this year. Of course, you guys mentioned earlier, brought in as, or maybe it was last night's show, brought in to be a reliever, and that's what Mike was expecting her to be. And then Clearwater happened, and no one was good. Sophia Simpson was good against UCLA, but then couldn't get some outs against another team, and no one could get outs against UCF, and that was just a wacky game and weekend. And shortly thereafter, Check was starting to get some starts, and then mid-March she threw, I think it was 5 2/3 innings of like 1-run ball against Louisiana on the road, and earned the win in the first game of the doubleheader they had against the Raging Cajuns. And then she came back, started the game on Friday against LSU in the non-conference series. LSU at that time a top 20 team, and shut him out on 3 hits. And it's like, oh, well, okay, she can pitch. And I remember shortly after that asking Mike in a pregame interview about her, and he said that they were starting to try to line her up and get her stamina up to be the Friday, Sunday starter in conference play. This was when Haley was, a little rocky and not quite what she turned into at the end of the season. And then Check started to fall off as well. But in the last couple of weeks, I know Mike mentioned once in a pregame interview that they realized that she was leaning back a little too much on her pitches. And so she was starting to fix that and throwing much better bullpens. And so she's getting her shots now because she got that fixed, and she's doing much better. And so she's been a big revelation for this team.
Let's talk about the last time you were on here. You were on with Vic on Selection Sunday night. By the way, so does Vic get partial credit here because brought good karma to you here? Because since you've been on, you go to Seattle, you win the regional, you go to Arkansas, come back from losing the first game to win the Supers in Fayetteville, and now you're here in the National Champ Series, beating Oklahoma State twice, a team that's been a nemesis in the last handful of years. Can you put into words this run, which I think is incredible, and what changed, if anything? What did you see that changed from this team since Seattle to now than prior to Seattle?
Yeah, it is an incredible run. I think this team, a lot has been mentioned about the chip on their shoulder, the playing with house money, all that sort of stuff. I think they might have been trying too hard to live up to their preseason expectations, and how, the national polls had them in the top 10 of the preseason. And some people made some wild declarations about them maybe getting the World Series. I have no idea who would have made that declaration, but no, just kidding, Eric. It was a good choice. Good call. But I think they were focusing so hard on, we got to play better, that when the seedings came down and they weren't a host, they just said, okay, well, all that's out the window. And all right, you know what? Let's just go. Screw it. We'll get out there. We'll do what we can. And I think the being snubbed for a host spot may have loosened them up a little bit. And they've been much more loose. They were a little loose throughout the season. About halfway through the season, you could see them 10, 15 minutes before the game started out, like throwing a football, running routes in the outfield, throwing the football, and doing the traditional hacky sack stuff. And I think just, since the postseason began, they've just been, again, more loose, and it's allowed them to not think too much. And so they've been able to just play their game, play to their abilities, and especially defensively. Defensively has been a huge improvement. I think the local beat writer for the newspaper tweeted something about the team had 17 double plays in their first 56 games. They've had 10 double plays in 12 postseason games. And so, I mean, of course, the pitcher has to make the pitches to begin with, but for them to turn so many double plays and just, flawlessly, like no bobble here, no like, errant throw there, and this fielder has to stay on the bag and reach out for it, can't throw to first. It's just been like routine. And the defense has just been excellent, and that's been one of the biggest things that's been the improvement.
It's been pretty remarkable. In my defense, by the way, until Missouri made the run to the SEC tournament, I had both UCF, Texas hosting. And maybe in retrospect, we should look at maybe not overreact. Committee shouldn't overreact to a team making a run in a conference tournament like Missouri did, which clearly helped them to host. But I do agree with you, though. I think it did benefit. I mean, I think you benefited from it because if you host, but you're the 16th seed, as UCF ended up being, you're in Oklahoma's draw. So you run into that brick wall. Instead, you had a tough road, but this was a theory that was quietly kind of being discussed in the sport is, would you rather host but have to deal with Oklahoma before the World Series, or go on the road but be away from Oklahoma as long as you can? And I think your team clearly and Mike White did a great job, I think, of using all of this as fuel. And you guys have been playing high-level softball from that point on. So I think I do think everybody won out here, Andrew. And plus, you got some free trips to Seattle and Fayetteville and OKC out of this. Come on.
Works for me.
But the thing that's so remarkable about the last 2 days was the unexpected heroes that we've seen. Courtney Day, her performance, and then JJ, that home run she hit Sunday night versus Arizona. Mm-hmm. It really is taking everybody on this team, and people things that covering the team, but us the casual fans may not know on a regular first name basis that are helping lead Texas to get them to this point right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I mentioned that to Mike before in the pregame interview before the Oklahoma State games. Like, is that what this is about? The unsung heroes, the players who have been in the background stepping up and not just relying on the top 3-4. Like, absolutely, like that's what gets it done at this point of the year. Although those swings of the bat weren't completely unexpected, Courtney Day has shown a lot of pop. She's now the team's home run leader for this year, won over Mary Iacopo at this point. Back in the shortened 2020 season, she led the team in home runs, had 5 as a true freshman, 2 of them against Haley Dolcini when Fresno State and Texas met up in Fullerton. So she's definitely got some pop, and that's why Mike White keeps putting her in there. Just if she makes contact, it's going to fly. And she makes good contact. She took 2 walks against Oklahoma and then had a single against them in the game a couple of days ago. And it looks like she's really starting to be comfortable at the plate at this point in the season. JJ, as a freshman last year, was an all Big 12 freshman pick. And I think she had a lot more pop than this year. She hit a good bunch. She was a very good pinch hitter. So she's someone who has gotten the job done in the past, who hasn't quite been able to get a starting job this year. They've rotated first base, her main position, a little bit. But she was able to, get a couple of starts recently and get a hold one as well. She's got some pop too. It's just a matter of getting comfortable and getting the swing, getting the experience.
Well, I want to ask you now, you play Oklahoma now, you get ready to play Oklahoma. You played Oklahoma State twice. So first of all, from a broadcaster, is this like a dream come true, like game notes wise? Like, these teams inside out, right? Played them so many times.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, you have I have my note sheet on all their players, and it's like, I don't even need to look at the sheet anymore because I know all their accolades. I know their, recruiting stuff. It's like, oh yeah, she's done that. She's got that, easy. And so it's helps me focus on the field when I don't have to look down and read the biographical information.
It's a dream. It's a dream come true for a broadcaster. People don't know that the inside. I mean, you still do the prep work and all that, but it's so much easier. It's like memorized. But so obviously you've called all 4 Oklahoma Texas meetings, which by the way, all close, including the win on Cat Osterman retirement day. Of the 4 games, what was one thing that stood out to you in each of those 4 games that you think people need to keep an eye on in this championship series?
I think from the first series, that series of 3 games in Austin in mid-April, I think there was, Texas kept the first game close, couple of mistakes, and OU won 3-0, and Texas had their chances, but chased a lot against Jordy Ball, and so I think if they rush, if they hurry, and especially facing Ball, if they're unable to hold back and not chase pitches out of the zone, what were the coaches telling me? It was something like Ball threw, I think 60% of her pitches ended up outside the zone in that game, at least 60%. And so if you only chase the pitches that are definitely strikes, then you're going to get more hittable pitches. And so that's one thing that Ball does well is that she tunnels her pitches and you can't tell. But these hitters are good enough that they have the experience and they've seen her a couple times now, and so that was one of the big things in coming back in the 3rd game of the series. They were able to wait on it better, and she struck out 14, 15 in the first game, and then maybe down to 8 or 9 in that 3rd game of the series. I don't remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head. But I think that is a big key. The middle game of that 3-game series, some people say that, OU ran away with it and it wasn't close. It was a 3-1 game going to the 5th inning. And Texas's freshman, Sophia Simpson, who shut down Arkansas, maybe the 2nd or 3rd best offense in the country for that super regional game 3. In the first inning, she faced, I believe it was, OU went with a lineup of Jennings, Alo, and Lyons. In the first inning, she struck them out, all 3 of them in a row, 3 All-Americans, and holy cow, she's flashed that ability this year, and once she can harness it and do it regularly, she's going to be one of the top pitchers in the country. And so if she can, do that again and focus and do what she can, then I think Texas has another option in the circle. She allowed a couple of solo home runs to Alyssa Brito, and then OU started to get some hits in the 5th inning. Chet came in, a couple of bunt hits against her, and some bloops, and it just got out of hand, and they won 9-1. So I think if Simpson is on, then Texas is definitely dangerous against that OU offense. And then the game that they played on Saturday, the winners bracket game, another close one. It was 2-1 going to the 5th, I believe, and 4 more runs for OU in the 5th inning. And so I think one of the keys that the Longhorns did well in the series in April that they'll need to do here that they didn't do on Saturday is taking care of the top of the order. The top 3 in the order back in April, I think, was a combined 1 or 2 for 18 in the 3 games. Just ridiculous that, Alo and Jennings were included in that. And then I think Hansen and Lyons were, splitting the number 3 spot. But it was mainly Dolcini, it was Simpson that held those 3 down and didn't let them beat the Longhorns. And that's definitely what kept games close. And in the game on Saturday, it was immediately Jada Coleman, a double, and then Alo hits the home run. And, oh, look, Texas is down, you're chasing the number 1 team in the country. So I think making sure you take care of that top of the order is probably going to be the biggest key for Texas in this championship series.
For Texas in particular, the defense, we always talk about how you can't give any team extra outs, particularly a team like Oklahoma who can make you pay when you get those extra outs. How important is it for Texas to continue having that strong defense to support whoever is in the circle, Andrew, to prevent Oklahoma getting those extra outs and those extra swings and potentially putting up that crooked number on the scoreboard?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest key. Behind setting down that top of the order, and then combined with it is making sure you make the plays, making sure that where to go with the ball. Washington in the first inning of the second game yesterday I wonder if Alexander baited her into throwing home. Alexander hesitated down the line on that ground ball and then broke for the plate. And Washington, the ball also came up on her a little bit, so she kind of double clutched it. And she still tried to throw home. Probably would have been better served going to first in the first inning of the game. Not a huge situation. Although facing a first-team All-American, maybe that was the call. Maybe it's like, hey, we got to prevent them from getting runs, period. But definitely making smart plays. I think the defense it might be the biggest thing that can be affected by the size of the crowd. And, it's going to be 12,000 whatever people there and probably 11,000 rooting for Oklahoma. And so they're going to have to focus and tune out the cheers and the jeers and the name calling and the horns down stuff. And they're just going to have to, make their plays. If they don't make the plays, it's not going to happen. And that's kind of the big thing.
Got a couple more questions for you. Of course, we're speaking with the Texas radio voice, Andrew Haynes, here with us on In the Circle Live. Speak to the fans of Texas and how how has this been greeted in Austin there. Obviously, everybody knows it's a great football school, the passion they have for that, great tradition in baseball. But I've sent you this, and I've tweeted it out, and I've written about it. TV numbers, people are watching Texas here. The Super Regional Game 3 against Arkansas is the most watched Super Regional game of all time in college softball. It just came out a couple hours ago. The Texas-Oklahoma State game, Game 3, 1.3 some million. It's the most watched game to this point in the World Series. The only thing that could top it is probably going to be one of these championship series. The ABC game, 1.2 million. A lot of eyeballs on Texas. That means a lot of Texas fans, but I would just give us a glimpse of what it's been like for because obviously you have a great relationship with the Texas fans, obviously as the radio voice. What has that been like?
Yeah, it's been pretty cool to see. Definitely at the start of the season, it was the first weekend that Texas was at home. It was pretty cold, and so they didn't get a great crowd. And but as things started to warm up, as the team started to recover from that Clearwater weekend, more fans showed up. They were getting more people, talking about it on social media and cheering them on and all that. And so I think the fans have definitely helped them out. It's the softball fan base in Austin still isn't quite like Alabama, Arkansas and Oklahoma, places like that where they're going to erupt after a strikeout in the first inning. You'll get a couple claps, but I think that they're still learning the game. They're still the fans are still trying to get into the rhythm. Of course, in baseball, it's the players aren't as energetic and demonstrative as they are in softball, which I think definitely helps around other stadiums in the country. When the players are up for it, then the fans are going to get up for it. And so Texas has been on the field more energetic, and I think that'll help the fans in Austin when they get back there and play next year to be more energetic. And also they're getting a ton of support in the social media at this point, which can only help the program with the fan base next year. And so I think the fans, for a while, for almost a decade, it's been 2013 was the last time they went to the World Series, and softball was not quite as big a sport at that point. So I think fans are starting to realize in Austin, softball's fun. Softball's fun to watch. We have a very good team. And so I think that's just something that the fan base and the team's going to build off each other in the coming years.
And then the last question, it's kind of ironic. It's odd that I'll ask you this, but obviously the big news off the field, Trisha Ford is the new head coach at Texas A&M, former Fresno State head coach. She's taken a page out of your playbook, moving from the West Coast to Texas. What was your reaction as you found that out? Because for those that may not be aware, you used to call Fresno State games, and she was there, right?
Yeah. So my first year doing Fresno State games, it was actually Margie Wright's last year. And I only filled in for a couple of games, did a couple of games in March, and then, a game or two, I think her final home game before they went off to the Mountain West tournament. So of course Wright retires and they bring in this Trisha Ford, and, I hadn't been a huge softball fan, but I had paid enough attention. And so, Ford comes in. I'm like, well, let's see what she does. And so I started to do more games. We didn't carry every game like we do at Texas. It was just home games with an occasional road visit, and not even every home game. So I ended up doing, I think my final year, 2016, about 20 home games. That was her final year as well, before she moved on to Arizona State. And so, yeah, I covered the team all 4 years she was there and saw them go from a decent team that had some talent left. When Wright retired, one of the players who Ford inherited ended up becoming the National Pro Fast Pitch MVP a couple years later, Brenna Moss. And so, there was talent. She brought in Jill Compton. She brought in a couple other good players and turned it into a team that, you mentioned earlier in the chat, some people thought that Fresno State should have hosted back in 2016, and Matt, that still hurts. They definitely should have, I thought. She's someone who can definitely, I think, turn a program around. Texas A&M, of course, very up and down this year. Beat some big teams, lost to some not so big teams, and so I think that's a big move for softball in Texas. I think Texas A&M is going to get better here. It'll be interesting to see how many players from Arizona State follow her, as was discussed in the comments. A number of players followed her from Fresno State, and almost to the Long Ducks level after Mike White left Oregon and came to Texas. And so that was definitely interesting hearing the news, like, oh, hey, I have a connection there. Trisha, I mean, honestly, I actually never met Trisha. We didn't do like a full pregame, postgame. I didn't, travel with the team. So I never actually met her in person, which was interesting. Just did, brief pregame shows, 5 minutes, and no coach interview. And so I wasn't really connected to the team at that point. But yeah, she's, I'm a little surprised she left the West Coast, because she's from the West Coast. She's coached on the West Coast her entire life, coaching career, as far as I know. But when Texas A&M comes calling, and being a couple hours from there, having friends and, family members through my wife, in-laws and all that, who have gone there. And that is just an enormous school, tons of money, all the cash you need, all the support you need. And I think she's going to really start to turn them into one of the better half of the SEC.
Well, it's going to be fun. You'll get to see her often here pretty soon down the road when Texas and A&M are in the same conference in the SEC.
Yep.
That'll be unique. But in the meantime, you got a lot of work to do. Big one, you're calling the championship series. Tell the audience where they can find you if they want to tune in.
Yeah. Check out texassports.com. And there's a fans link on the top, I think. And then you can go to like audio streaming. If you want it quicker, actually go to the Texas softball Twitter account. They'll have, a couple hours before the game, they'll post a little a tweet with some links, and you click on, go to the links, and then there's a listen button, and click to listen. It brings you right to the page, and you can listen right there. I know the games have been occasionally on Sirius XM recently. I'm not sure if they are in this World Series. I haven't heard whether they are or not, but maybe you can find it on there. I think 375 and 384 have been the channels we've been on in Sirius XM over the, I heard it was the Big 12 tournament and the regional at Washington. Maybe the super regional games were on there as well. And so maybe they're on right now for the World Series. But again, I don't know.
You're a national guy. I love it. This is great. Hey, man. Not too many people can say they get to call a national championship series. You get to do that. We're excited for you. You know that. We've always enjoyed you on the show. Have a great broadcast this week, and send our best to Brian Davis, who's going to retire as one of the great SIDs here. What a way for him to go out to play here, part of the championship series. So send us our best to him as well. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. And I will send the best to Brian. And that's one thing that's been pretty cool is, he's – the entire season he's been like, all right, that's it. This is it for me. And they just keep going. And he emailed me last night after I sent him the highlights of my broadcast, like, man, this is a hell of a ride. So yeah, I definitely will. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem, man. Andrew Haynes, radio voice of the Texas Longhorns. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool story there.
That's awesome. And I think we talk about SIDs and people who get the nose and get the push for the players out there. Brian Davis is the standard for all SIDs in terms of softball, what he's done. And we know we've had a chance to actually talk to him a little bit. We were out of Clearwater a couple years ago, kind of get everything set up. He's the best at what he does, and we're so thankful that he gets to be a part of this journey and the story of Texas. And hey, maybe Texas sends him off in the sunset with a national championship. We will have to wait and see.
It's pretty something. That he worked at Tennessee a long time, did in the NFCA for a while, and that was also pretty cool perspective. Andrew Gaines, who called a lot of the Fresno games there during the Trisha Ford era, I can relate to the, hey, I haven't talked to the coach in person, though. That brings back memories as well a little bit from the earlier days when I started. I think we've all been there at some point, especially when you start young, right? But, that's a lot of fun. All right, so that was the Texas perspective. Let's bring in now the Oklahoma perspective. He covers OU athletics for 247. He's one of the best. I've enjoyed him this year at the media sessions that have for the weekly Patty Gasso, which is an experience in it itself. And, of course, he's covering once again the Women's College World Series. We speak of Joey Helmer, who joins us here on In the Circle. How you doing?
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, what has this World Series been like? You've covered a few of these now. Describe this Women's College World Series 2022 edition.
Tell you what, that game last night between Texas and Oklahoma State is one of the craziest things I've ever seen with that play there. And it just – I think I'm still shocked at what happened, but this has been a really, really good World Series. It really has. Both teams that are in the championship in Oklahoma and Texas obviously lost games, and so had to play on elimination. That is what Oklahoma did last year as well. So there's been so many upsets in this tournament, guys. You obviously have followed that so closely, and I think that has really shown the parity in this sport, and that's something that's made this tournament really interesting as well.
What's been your thoughts of Oklahoma's run here? They dropped the game to UCLA yesterday to force the if necessary game, and then they responded big time, just run rolling UCLA 15-0. Jocelyn Alo putting on a show, one of the great performances, 7 RBIs match, tying a Women's College World Series. What's been your thoughts on the Oklahoma run, especially because you and I have covered. Everybody's covering the story angle. The Jordy Ball mystery. Finally got to see her pitch a lot yesterday. Patty Gasso today on the media availability said that she's good to go. What's been your thoughts on this Oklahoma run?
Yeah, I mean, it had been really, really impressive. They had dominated everyone. You've covered UCF really closely for a while now, and Oklahoma was really successful against a team in the nights that I really, really respect. I was impressed regardless of what those scores say in that super regional. Those were competitive games. UCF brought it, and Oklahoma had a task on hand and really took care of business. And so up until the point that they got to the World Series, then you look and they run ruled Northwestern and fairly easily took care of Texas. And then the UCLA game was kind of the benchmark. This is where the proverbial we got to get over the hump type game. And Oklahoma responded as emphatically as they possibly could have. So it was really, really impressive to beat a team that good. I mean, UCLA is really, really good. You don't get into the Final Four without being that caliber of team, and they just beat them 15-0. So I was really impressed by the bounce back statement from Oklahoma in that semifinal, the second game there. And that's a little bit of momentum. Speaking of momentum, Texas has all the momentum right now based on the postseason run that they've had. So that's been fascinating for me to watch. I thought that Super Regional in Fayetteville was incredible, and they lost to Oklahoma and went ahead and bounced back and beat Oklahoma State twice yesterday, which was just so impressive.
For the Texas perspective, it's remarkable seeing, again, losing to Oklahoma Saturday and then having to bounce back, beat Arizona Sunday night, and beat Oklahoma State, who has held a number for the last few years and beat them twice, and beat Maxwell, who has owned them ever since she arrived in Stillwater. Were you surprised at how Texas beat Oklahoma State twice to set up this Red River Showdown for the title versus the Sooners?
Yes, I thought Texas might get one game from them. I really did. I thought there was a chance that they could get that first game, and they did. And I was curious to see what would happen in the second game. And Oklahoma State responded exactly like they needed to. They jump out to a 5-0 lead. And I think all of us probably, I know I tweeted it out. I was ready for Bedlam to be the championship at that point. And at the top of the fourth inning, I believe it was, when Texas got the 3-run homer, Maxwell lost command a little bit, and that homer allowed them to get back into the game to where, you get a base runner on and one swing potentially. Obviously, that's not how it played out, but they were back in the game at that point. Until that point, Maxwell had been dominant, and so there was really no reason to believe that the Longhorns had a chance to come back at that point. So I'm just so incredibly impressed at the resiliency of this Texas team. And we've seen it throughout the course of the year. They go 0-5 in Clearwater. And I think a lot of people early in the season are like, man, is this Texas team going to be good? What's the status of this team? They don't end up hosting a regional, and none of that matters. Here they are. They do it the hard way and get to the championship series.
I want to get your vantage point. You were at the stadium on that wacky play in the 5th inning. I know you've tweeted about it. I think we're all in the same boat. We still can't believe what we saw there, but that's going to be one of the more memorable plays, certainly in Austin and in Stillwater. Where was your vantage point from what you saw in that play?
So I was right smack dab in the middle of the press box. I had a back row seat, if you will. I was on the second level, but I saw it all, and it was just so surreal. You think it's a base hit to right field. The right fielder comes up, and probably she's not going to throw her out at the plate, even if she comes up clean. You're thinking, okay, it's a 5-4 game, maybe runners at first and second after that. And next thing you know, you throw the hit. They do everything right. After the first error, they hit the cutoff. The runner is dead to rights in the middle of second and third there. And for whatever reason, Busby just lasers one, and it's wide. And the center fielder, I think maybe you want to try and back that up a little bit quicker, but you're not anticipating that throw is going to go where it ends up. So it was just wild. It was helter-skelter. And then you see that the runner coming all the way around that had the single, and it almost took a couple minutes to realize that all 3 runs had scored on that play. So it was just frenzied chaos, and something I said there's really no describing how that play can happen. I mean, we can sit there and ask all the questions about, what could you have done differently? I mean, do you not throw the ball as hard? There's really no way to describe it. It was just a freak play. I mean, it just happened like that.
It's crazy. It's a play we will not forget. So that brings us to OU Texas. Give me your thoughts. What's your thoughts now as we get set for this champ series? These two teams are familiar to each other. We know about the rivalry. What's your early thoughts on this series?
It's incredibly fascinating on a couple of levels. I'm trying to think when the last time is. So I was talking with someone actually in the press box about this last night, and when the last time was that a team was waiting on in any sport, really, when you think about it. I'd be curious if you guys could help me out with this, but when one team was waiting on its 2 rivals to win so it could play one of its rivals in the championship. It's fascinating that Oklahoma was kind of sitting there waiting on that. And so you have a rivalry game that's it's heated. It always is. You think about the great rivalries around the country, they're that way. And then you have the storylines of everything within the game. I mean, Jocelyn Alo, what she's done, just the greatest home run hitter of all time. How will Texas's pitching with Dolcini and company, how will they handle that? And then again, you have the Texas team that has really found itself in this postseason, that's scoring a lot of runs, that looks like as confident of a bunch as you could possibly be heading into the series. So there's so many different storylines, and it's going to be a really good series, guys.
You mentioned Jocelyn Alo and the performance she had on Monday, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, tying a Women's College World Series record. If she brings home another national championship, she's the most outstanding player. Are we now mentioning her as the greatest softball player in college softball history?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can throw some names around, but I have never. I think this is a fairly easy comment, a fairly general comment to make, but I've never seen anyone hit home runs like Jocelyn Alo does. And what I mean by that, that home run that was inside the left field foul pole yesterday, that thing was an absolute mood shot. I mean, Lauren Chamberlain used to hit home runs that would make our jaws drop, guys. And Jocelyn Alo is doing stuff that Lauren Chamberlain even didn't do in terms of how far she's hitting these home runs. These are no doubters. I remember one in super regionals that she hit over the center field wall that left the stadium. I mean, these are mammoth home runs. And so when you talk about that GOAT situation and the greatest home run hitter of all time, that certainly leaves her right there at the top of the case for being that greatest player ever.
I'll say incredible. What has it been like covering her in person? What's it been like talking to her? What is she like?
She's fantastic. I mean, she is so you wouldn't really believe how humble this young lady is. She knows how good she is, obviously, but she doesn't really carry herself like that. She is very selfless. You'll see her coaching up the team at times. A lot of times when Oklahoma, when they do rarely struggle offensively, the coaching staff, they do a great job. I mean, it's not taking anything away from JT Gasso and Patty Gasso, but there are times when they really don't have to coach because Jocelyn Alo can come back to the dugout and say, hey, here's what I saw. I saw this drop ball. You know, this pitcher's doing this with the rise, all these kinds of things. And so she's almost like an extra coach out on the field. And it's such a selfless thing to see in covering her. It really, guys, it's impressive. And then you have the way that she just absolutely loves the game. I mean, we've seen these players from time to time to where they're so entrenched. They just absolutely love being out there, and they're so deeply entrenched in it that it's just how they carry themselves.
Are you surprised that not just the fact that we're seeing the record television numbers, but it seems that every session this year we're seeing a new attendance record being broken in Oklahoma City, not just for Oklahoma, but for all the sessions. How much is this particular year and what we've seen the last few years is continuing to make the sport of softball more popular? We saw it on the A block of Parney Interruption today. 3 years ago, you wouldn't even think that would be a possibility.
Yeah, and Victor, I happened to see Eric does a really good job as far as the exposure of this game and showing the television ratings. And that game that was on ABC for Oklahoma was a big time hitter. It was a big time hitter. And that last year, Oklahoma had the super regional game against Washington that was also on ABC.
Right.
And was a big time hitter as well. And so those are two examples. There are plenty of examples this year of games on, ESPN. The SEC network does an incredible job. This sport, the television aspect of it has grown immensely. And it's no surprise at the fan support and the turnout that you're now seeing. Guys, the first game of the tournament, I pulled up and I was early for the game. I was there. Oklahoma played the 11 o'clock game, if you remember, on Thursday. I believe I'm losing track of my days now.
Yes,
Yep, second game. Yeah, we all do. We all do it during this time of year.
But I guys, I got there early and there was nowhere to park in the media parking lot. They had exhausted all the media parking, and there were so many fans that had overflowed and that they had let them park in the lot, and it was absolutely packed. And so that is a tribute. That's the evidence right there of how big this sport has become. In that, if you want to get a parking spot, you better show up a couple hours early.
Smart. Yeah, that's a good call. I remember that from 2018 too. I want to ask you, because I covered the World Series 2018. I saw this at firsthand, and I've seen it now the last couple of years with Zoom. Shout out to OU SID Patrick Dunn, who is giving me access to the program with the Zoom media availabilities with Coach Gasso during the week. But the intense coverage that Oklahoma softball gets, just describe that for the audience. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because it's really you treat softball there like everybody treats college football, right? Like, because you cover all the sports. Put that in perspective on the coverage that OU softball gets and why how it's become so big.
It's huge, guys. I mean, you talk about Oklahoma's softball program and the way you cover it. It's big time. I mean, it's, you know, I cover it as I do when I cover football in the fall. I am that entrenched in it. There is that big of a following. People around here love this sport. They absolutely eat it up day after day. And that starts in February. It starts from the season opener. And so, yeah, there's a ton of media coverage. It's a lot of fun to be around this team. And something else it's great to have been in person around the team again this year. That was something the last couple of years, especially during the 21 season, that we were unable to. Everything was Zoom, and so it was a little bit more impersonal. And so it's been better on those grounds as well this year. So, but the media coverage, it's huge around this program. It's clearly, there's such a huge following. They're going to make the new stadium here pretty soon, and that's going to be around 3,000 fans or so, I believe. And so it really couldn't be a whole lot bigger in terms of the fan support right now and the love and support around this program.
It's enormous. I mean, they're a huge TV draw. Look, I mean, on our podcast, when we've had Oklahoma guests, the numbers spike big time, like insane numbers. Like our yearly interview with Patty Gasso is one of the most downloaded episodes of the year. I mean, full disclosure on that from that perspective. When did this, because you've covered OU athletics for a long time. And for those that don't know, OU athletics has had a lot of great success. Their baseball team just won a regional in Gainesville. Obviously, football is king there. Yeah. But men's basketball's had success. I mean, it's a great athletic department. I think gymnastics have been a national title.
Gymnastics, national championship contenders.
But I'm curious, as long as you've covered this beat, OU athletics, what was the moment where softball took off at OU? How long is this goes back?
So in my estimation, when I could really, really tell that it was starting to take that step, I think I started covering the team in 2009 or 2010. And when it really took the next step, in my opinion, was during the 2012 season. If you remember right, and that's when Kalani Ricketts and company lost to Alabama in that national championship series. But that year, really, the interest was on another level. And then you came into the 2013 season, and it just seemed to take off. There was the great story around that team. That was the year the tornado hit and more. And so everyone kind of rallied. The team rallied around that. They went and helped clean up everything. And it really seemed like everyone rallied around that team. And since then, it's been on a whole different level. So I would say 9-10 years ago. And then it's just absolutely huge today.
Where does softball rank in the OU sports? I mean, football's one, but where does softball rank among all the other sports?
It's such a good question, and it's one that when I answer, like, I don't want to get in trouble answering it the wrong way, but it is right there with men's basketball. I'm hard pressed not to say, guys, that's not number 2. I mean, it is legitimately right there. You have the basketball programs, and then obviously football is king, but it's huge. I mean, for someone, if they had never been on campus before and came to a regular season game, they might be. Now, you've seen the SEC atmospheres. I think it's fairly similar to what you would get in a Gainesville or a Tuscaloosa at Rhodes Stadium or somewhere like that. But a lot of people that have not been in some of those venues may be surprised at the venue during the regular season for an Oklahoma softball game.
No, I can believe that. And, Patty Gasso has been a big part of that. What's it been like covering her as long as you have? What has she been like?
She's been incredible. I think one thing that has sort of, and I say this, people can understand how big the football program has been for a long, long time. And so you can understand maybe why the access would be a little bit different, but something that's been so good about Patty Gasso for the length of time that I've covered it is she's allowed great access to us. She has allowed us to be around the team and get to know the team. And as someone that calls games, Eric, you can understand how important that relationship is. For me, I just feel like, and that's kind of why I brought up earlier the thing about the Zoom situation, because now being in person, we get to know these ladies on a different level than we were able to last year. And so Patty Gasso allows us to do that. And that's what it's been like covering her program. It's been open access in a lot of ways. And I firmly believe that she's benefited a lot from that. There's no question. It's something that Brent Venables is trying to do right now as well with his program, is to open it up a little bit, because fans, you got to feed this beast to get the fans involved. And Patty Gasso has done a tremendous job with that. And now look where it's taken this program.
I agree. She's told me when she's been on the podcast, she's a lot more open now than she was, say, 10, 12 years ago. She's more comfortable and speaking out as she has and being more open. When you win 5 national championships, perhaps 2 wins from a 6, you can be a little more open, right?
Yeah.
I gotta ask about Jordy Ball. That's been the big question. Big story today. Patty Gasso says she's a full go. What has it been like covering Jordy Ball? Because she's another one that's got a little bit of a phenomenon there. And then this injury story angle. What is it? It's been a weird story to cover.
So I was talking with someone else in the press box last night about just her demeanor and how she carries herself. And she's kind of similar to Lexi Thompson at Clemson with how animated she is. She's kind of the opposite of Kelly Maxwell at Oklahoma State, who's just so a matter of fact in her how she carries herself. But Jordy Ball is an absolute delight to cover. She's a fun kid. She's only a freshman, so she's going to be a lot of fun to cover for the coming years here. And just what she's been able to do, I mean, that's a true ace that Oklahoma is going to have for 3 more seasons. So you look in what they're bringing in with a number 1 pitcher as well. They're going to be in very good shape there, but it'll be interesting to see how they use her in this championship series. Patty said that she is available. She is going to pitch. So that's absolutely good news for Oklahoma. There was a time that we thought maybe she wasn't going to come back this year. It looked like they might not bring her back. And until we got the news before this World Series that, yes, she was going to pitch in it, I wasn't certain that was going to be the case.
Well, they're happy to have her. And that'll be our last question here. What's the key in this matchup, Texas OU? If OU does blank, they win. What's the key? Your thoughts?
So I wrote a piece before this Women's College World Series started. And Oklahoma has done a pretty good job for the most part at doing my 3 keys to win. And those being, they got to throw strikes. These pitchers, if there's any concern for Oklahoma, without Ball, if she's unable to pitch, to me, it was losing the strike zone. And Nicole May and Hope Troutline have done that at times. But that hasn't been a glaring issue. If it has, it could have been problematic. There were times also this year that in that loss to Oklahoma State, they weren't squaring balls up right. I think give credit to Maxwell for some of that because they were popping balls up and didn't look like their approach at the plate was good. They have to have a good approach at the plate. But the number one thing to me that has been the difference maker for Oklahoma the second half of the season has been their defense. They have been so good defensively. I think they have the best outfield in the country. I would have a hard time if someone tried to make that argument against me. But to play sound defense in a championship series, you can't make mistakes. You don't figure that Oklahoma would make mistakes, but earlier this year, they were kind of self-inflicting at times in the error category. So those are the keys. Stay away from those things. Don't make the mistakes. Keep having the same approach at the plate and pound the strike zone because if you pound the strike zone, that defense is going to work for you.
That's Joey Helmer. He covers OU athletics for 247. Tell the audience where they can find your work and the great coverage that you do.
Sure. So you can find all my written stuff at ouinsider.com, and then I'm available at Twitter at Joey Helmer 247. Thank you, guys.
Hey, I enjoy your work. I'm glad to have you on. I follow you with not only your great coverage at softball, but I definitely will be following your football, especially now that Dylan Gabriel is over there. It's another former UCF quarterback. Yeah. It's all these ties all of a sudden, the UCF in Oklahoma. But, hey, man, enjoy the championship series.
Hey, thank you guys again. I appreciate it.
All right, that's Joey Helmer joining us here on In the Circle live show. Of course, Vic, we can't have a live show without breaking news.
Of course. What breaking news do we have on our live stream this evening, sir?
So ESPN has just announced the field for the 2023 Clearwater Invitational.
Already?
Yep, just announced it through our friends at 7 Innings Podcast. Here's the field.
Shout out to 7 Innings. I mean, go ahead and announce it. I'll go ahead and pull up the tweet.
Yeah, it is Alabama will be in Clearwater. That means Gray Roberts and Tom Canterbury, Vic.
That means they'll be broadcasting on a perch above left center field like J.J. Jackson did with Auburn this past year.
I'll defer to you on all the technical side of that. Arizona makes its trip to Clearwater. I believe it's the first time Arizona.
Yes, first time for Arizona.
Arkansas will be in the field. Courtney Deifel and company. Duke out of the ACC. Florida State, once again, back in there. Indiana, Shonda Stan and the Hoosiers representing the Big Ten. How about that?
I like it. Hey, we saw how well it worked for Northwestern this past year.
UCF makes its return after making its debut a year ago, sending Ball in the Knights, making it a Super Regionals. They're back there. The Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana.
Ooh,
we're going to have Cajun fans coming in Clearwater.
You know what that means, Eric? You
Yeah.
need to tailgate with those Cajun fans.
Well, I know you got that now, sir.
Trust me. Absolutely.
Michigan will be in Clearwater. Mississippi State just made the Super Regionals. They'll be in the field. Nebraska. Rhonda Revelle. Nate Rohr.
Hey, Nate. Eric, I already have the idea for what we're going to do with that. I'll talk with that with you off air. Trust me. I have some ideas.
I know where you're going. Oklahoma State will be in the field. South Florida will be in the field. We've talked a lot about Trisha Ford at Texas A&M. We're going to see her in person in Clearwater because they're in the field.
Wow.
And then last but we got UCLA and Virginia Tech to round out the 16-team field in the women's. 15 of those 16, by the way, made the NCAA tournament. The only one that didn't was Indiana. Your thoughts there quick on the field.
Strong field, very impressive field, and depending on what the early schedule is, that could be Trisha Ford's opening weekend.
Probably Texas week 2. Maybe.
Like you say, week 2. Again, week 2, likely week 1. And again, We'll see what the opening weekend entails as we go through the summer and schedules get leaked out and announced by various schools. But
now the weekend for Clearwater, the dates are February 16th through the 19th. Tickets will go on sale in the fall. That's a strong field. And
strong field.
I like the addition of the Cajuns too, by the way. That's a little twist, a little tweak.
I like it. All right, so trust me, the radio. Trust me, we have some ideas of what we're talking about off here. But by the way, before we let you go, before we sign off, Eric, you are going to be a part of an Oklahoma live stream coming up in a few minutes yourself, sir.
Literally in a few seconds from now, I'll be joining our buddy Sean over on the stream. His little OU YouTube chat. It's been a big stream there, so I'll be joining him. We'll talk more in depth. Yes. Oklahoma, Texas. So if you want more coverage on that, go there to Onikuno. I believe it's Onikuno. He's probably mad because I'm going to be about a couple minutes late, but he's used to covering for a few minutes. That's okay. I mean, I wasn't expecting Clearwater Invitational field to come out.
Hey, we'll take it.
So I'll be over there again. Pregame show tomorrow night. What time we're coming on there?
7 o'clock Eastern time. Eric will be holding down the pregame for on Wednesday. And
I'll tweet out the guests tomorrow.
Yes, tweet out the guests tomorrow. And then post-game, after game one, about 15, 20 minutes after game one, we will go live. Can we tell the people who we're going to be having on for our post-game tomorrow night?
Well, it'll be a late night, first pitch 8:30, so it's only fitting we go out west where our good friend Kinsey Fowler will be scheduled to join us. Yeah. Fowler After Dark.
Yeah, that's a new hashtag. Let me write that down.
I mean, we've had her on before in the past, so why not? We'll look forward to having her as part of our championship series coverage among other different guests on that. That's going to do it for this show. Thanks to Justin McLeod from Extra Innings to join us. Joey Helmer from 247 for Oklahoma does a great job covering there. Andrew Haynes, the radio voice of Texas. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like us there. You can catch all the archives of our content. Podcast came out earlier this morning.
Nicole Mendez
was on the podcast
as well. Yes.
We talked broadcasting career with her. Victor's got a big show coming up Thursday edition of In the Circle, D2 edition, isn't it, Vic?
D2 and potentially D3. Follow our social media for all of that.
So for Victor, I'm Eric. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of In the Circle Live. We'll see you on the pregame show, 7 o'clock Eastern, Wednesday night, prior to game one between Oklahoma and Texas at the championship series. This has been In the Circle.
Free Brittany Griner and good night, Canada.